The training grounds of Outpost Kethera hummed with the low vibration of shield generators, a constant reminder that this moon existed on the edge of civilized space. Lieutenant Rhea Dalen stood at the center of the combat arena, her tactical vest still smoking slightly from the plasma drill she'd just concluded. Around her, scattered like fallen stars across the metallic floor, lay 7 Vakrian cubs, apex predators in training, each no older than 5 solar cycles. They were supposed to be completing endurance exercises. Instead, they had collapsed mid-drill, their sleek obsidian fur rising and falling with the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. Rhea should have been annoyed. The Vakrian Empire had specifically requested human instructors after witnessing their soldiers' performance in the Corridor Wars, and she'd been assigned to train the next generation of their warrior caste. These cubs were descendants of generals, warlords, and fleet commanders. Each one would someday command battalions. They were bred for violence, engineered over millennia to be the perfect soldiers. And yet, here they were, sleeping like children after just 3 hours of basic combat training. The smallest cub, Kiro, had curled himself into a tight ball near her boots. His ear twitched occasionally, and his claws, retracted even in sleep, flexed against his chest. He'd been struggling all morning, his smaller frame unable to keep pace with his clutchmates. When the others had finally succumbed to exhaustion, Kiro had tried to continue, his amber eyes burning with determination that reminded Rhea uncomfortably of herself at that age. He'd managed another 10 minutes before his legs had simply given out. She should wake them. Command protocols were clear: maintain discipline, enforce structure, never show weakness in front of an allied species that measured strength by blood spilled and enemies conquered. Instead, Rhea deactivated her combat gauntlets and sat down. The floor was cold against her legs, but she didn't mind. She'd felt colder on the ice moons of Epsilon Eridani, colder still in the vacuum-exposed corridors of the Valiant, when hull breaches had turned her ship into a frozen tomb. This was comfortable by comparison. Kiro's breathing hitched, and he shifted closer to her, seeking warmth in that instinctive way all young creatures did. His head came to rest against her thigh, and she felt the rapid flutter of his dual heartbeats through the thin fabric of her uniform. Vakrians ran hot. Their metabolisms burned like fusion cores to fuel their enhanced musculature and accelerated reflexes. Even in sleep, Kiro was a furnace. Rhea found herself reaching down, her calloused fingers gently scratching behind his pointed ear. The cub made a small sound, something between a purr and a rumble, and pressed into her touch. The irony wasn't lost on her. These cubs were training to fight humans someday, if the political winds shifted. The Vakrian-human alliance was barely a decade old, forged in desperation against the hive collective that had nearly consumed both species. Peace was profitable now, but Rhea had lived long enough to know that peace was always temporary. Yet watching Kiro sleep, she couldn't reconcile this exhausted child with the feared predators she'd faced in war simulations. The Vakrian Empire wanted to know what made humans so effective in combat, why pound for pound weaker humans consistently outperformed their superior soldiers. They'd expected tactics, technology, some secret weapon. They hadn't expected patience. One of the other cubs, Sarax, if Rhea remembered correctly, rolled over with a small grunt, her training blade still clutched in one paw. She was dreaming, her legs moving in slow motion as if running through some imaginary battlefield. Tomorrow, Rhea would teach her proper blade work, how to flow rather than force, how to turn an opponent's strength against them. Tomorrow, she would drill them until their muscles screamed and their pride demanded they continue past their limits. But today, she would let them sleep. The sun was setting beyond the translucent dome overhead, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Kethera's primary star painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, colors that never existed on Earth but had become familiar during Rhea's years in deep space. She'd seen 100 worlds, fought on 50, and buried friends on too many to count. She'd also seen something the Vakrians hadn't. She'd seen what happened when you pushed young soldiers too hard, too fast. She'd watched fresh recruits break under pressure, seen promising careers end in medical discharges or worse. The human military had learned through centuries of brutal trial and error that warriors weren't forged through relentless cruelty. They were cultivated through measured challenge and calculated rest. The Vakrians, for all their genetic advantages, had never learned to rest. Their culture celebrated endurance through pain, growth through suffering. Cubs were pushed until they broke, and those who survived became the elite. It was effective in its way, but it wasted potential. For every Vacrian warrior who emerged from training, 3 fell away, too damaged, too traumatized, or simply dead. Rhea intended to change that. Kiro stirred again, his eyes flickering open to reveal those striking amber irises that seemed to glow in the fading light. He looked up at her, confusion crossing his young face as he realized where he was. His ears flattened in embarrassment. Vacrians hated displaying weakness. "Easy," Rhea said softly, her hand still resting on his head. "You did well today." Kiro's translator chip rendered her words into his native tongue, but his expression suggested he didn't believe her. "I failed the endurance test," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive harmonics of Vacrian speech. "I am weak." "You're 5 years old," Rhea replied. "Your body is still growing. You pushed yourself past the point where your clutchmates quit, and you only stopped because your body forced you to. That's not weakness, Kiro. That's learning your limits." The cub tilted his head, a gesture that meant confusion in his species. "But warriors have no limits." Rhea smiled, a gesture the Vacrians had learned to recognize as non-threatening, though it still showed her flat herbivore teeth. "Warriors know their limits," she corrected, "and they know when to push past them and when to rest. You can't fight if you're too exhausted to stand. You can't protect your pack if you've broken yourself trying to prove something to no one who matters." She could see him processing this, his young mind working through concepts that contradicted everything his culture had taught him. Around them, the other cubs were beginning to stir, their internal clocks telling them something had changed. "Tomorrow," Rhea said, addressing them all as they woke, "we'll try again, and the next day, and the day after that. You'll get stronger, faster, better. But tonight you rest. That's not an order from your instructors. It's a lesson from humans who learned it the hard way." Cairo looked up at her one more time, something like understanding dawning in his eyes. Then he closed them again, settled back against her leg, and returned to sleep. Rhea stayed there as the stars emerged overhead, watching over 7 young predators who would someday be warriors. She stayed as the night watch began their patrol, as the base lights flickered on, as the temperature dropped and her legs went numb from sitting. She stayed because someone had to teach these cubs what their own species couldn't, that mercy wasn't weakness, that rest wasn't failure, and that the strongest warriors were the ones who knew when to fight and when to simply be present. She stayed because that's what humans did. They endured.